core samples, and this was considered an undesirable result. And so they were trying to figure out why some of their core drills were creating star holes. And so they went back to the laboratory, took a wood lathe and some galvanized metal piping, and then they started varying the speeds of the lathe, and they finally were able to reconstruct that what was causing these star holes was the drill bits as they were going down were dulling a little, and therefore they're getting slightly smaller than the width of the diameter of the hole. And so what was going on as the drills were going down, they were bouncing around in the hole. And the bounce was occurring at a very specific harmonic frequency, and so every time the drill bit was going in the hole, it was bouncing at a very specific point, and as it bounced, it hits the wall of the hole and gouges it. And this one here is, bouncing about 5 times per complete rotation of the drill bit. And they also found that, and this one's not a good example of it, but that vibration rate changed slightly, and so a lot of the holes you get an actual rifling effect, like the inside of a rifle barrel.
You get a swirl inside. And the Flint Quarry was it's the only place that has some samples you can see that's real.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If you're ever in Western Mass, it's worth it. They just open to the public. They in fact, the interest is opening up.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's worth taking it in. It's all self-guided, but
So this is the result of a single, drill bit going down, bouncing in the hole, creating these, little lobes on it. They come in 5 and 6 point varieties. Most of the time, they're very rounded. But of only a single example that's more pointed. We have no idea exactly how that occurred, but a similar process, but it's a different vibration frequency. So yeah, it was a bit of a surprise when we came over to scout this tour out to find one. It's good to know there's another example. These rocks here would have been brought in from someplace else. So there's probably they're probably could have been blasting a road cut. It could be quarry scrap. There's a lot of sources for this. All up and down the road here is quite a few more boulders, but they're all rounded holes. This size diameter hole is a blast hole. And this probably goes the whole way through the rock with the cables.
Oh, yeah.
Flung through it.
Yeah. That was my job in the service.
Oh, really?
Powderman, demolition. What do we know? What kind of rock that is, and does that matter?
It's in the granite family, and blasting usually was done in the harder rocks, softer rocks like marble, limestone. Blasting will just completely disintegrate the rock, and it's counterproductive unless you wanted to crush the rock. Whereas granite blasts generally quite well, especially if you put the holes in the right layout and don't overcharge them. Most blast holes were only charged part way up, and then the powder. We tend to use black powder over versus dynamite. Dynamite is too strong a blast, whereas black powder would very nice crack in the rock. And anyways, from a quarter to a third of the way up the hole was filled with black powder, and then the top of the hole was filled with sand, clay, stone dust, whatever they had on hand, and the fuse put down through and ignited. A lot of times it'd be a series of blast holes because they want to take off a large block, maybe a 10-pound block, and just pop it off the quarry ledge.
You also have boulders in the field that would be quarried. Blasted. And there's one they'll put the hole generally in the middle, and the other little tidbit about the blasted boulders is they generally split in
2 to 3 pieces.
2 to 3 pieces, but they'll have a V shape out. They don't go straight. Well, almost every single one we have has a V shape. So you can tell if it's a blast hole versus a plug and feather.
Right.
In the boulders that you find out in the field that have been blasted with a single blast hole, most of the time we're looking at some sort of field clearing activity where the boulder is simply too big for the oxen team to be able to drag it out of the field. So you break it up into 2 or 3 pieces, and then it becomes, the weight is within the range of the oxen team to pull it out.
Would that have been a mechanical drill or a hand drill?
The field boulders would be a hand drill. The mechanical drills that were being used in the quarries were developed in the 1860s. They're either powered by compressed air or by steam, and at the time the compressors and steam engines were quite large.
Not very portable.
Expensive, took a lot to move them on site, and so if you any mechanical drilling largely is relegated to the commercial quarries. Post dates, roughly 1868. That's about the earliest we really start to see them show up in any amount of usage. And this here is probably a mechanically drilled hole. It's a large diameter, goes quite a ways down.
And the star effect would be the result of a mechanical,
yes,
because it's a repeated as opposed to a hand drill.
Right. You need a steady rotational speed for the drill bit in order to create the harmonic frequencies that result in the drill bit bouncing off the edges of the drill hole and creating these star lobes. So you can very safely say this boulder was drilled sometime after the 1870, and most likely in this case probably from the early 20th century. The smaller half-round holes, you see an example here. A lot of the rock is still in the quarry because it wasn't terribly useful. It broke into very irregular pieces. And it's just abandoned. Most likely the people working this quarry were probably amateurs. A knowledgeable quarry company or quarryman would never even bother with this ledge. It's too fractured up to split properly.
Did the Jenkins family have their hand in granite as well as the soapstone?
There's a rumor they did, but I can't confirm that historically with any documentation.
that had been passed down to us too.
Right.
But I have never seen anything in writing.
Right.
Yeah.
That's I'm running the same thing. I think the assumption is since they own most of the property up here that
they dabbled in whatever they could.
Right.
Timber and the soapstone and the granite.
Right.
Well,
if they were in the granite, it's probably from a different time period or a different company, because that major granite quarry over there was using a slightly different set of technologies. So as the soapstone, they were using heavily the Cape chisels to cut those sort of V-shaped and trapezoid-shaped marks. You find absolutely none of them over there. It's all round hole and blast hole. So they date from different eras.
Oh, okay.
That's one of the things that's sort of confused as to who is responsible for the quarry operation.
Oh, yeah.
And despite an extensive search, I haven't been able to turn up any documentation on it. I haven't done a deed search yet, so that's a possibility. I can turn something up. But,
Oh, what's it?
looking at the deeds.
Oh, the deeds. Oh, yeah.
That's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work.
It's not on any of the maps. It doesn't show up in any of the newspapers. So we're having a bit of a loss. So you have this is they call it a plug drill. It's a single blade versus your double-bladed star drills that you see today. And the key difference with a stone drill is it's got a V-shaped top. It's not flat. And what that does is actually allow you to drill a perfectly round hole. If it's flat, it tends to create a more triangular shaped hole. And so they'd hold it up against the rock. They'd have a maybe a 3 or 4 pound hammer. Hit it, rotate it a little bit, hit it, and keep rotating it. And what you end up doing is sort of grinding the rock away. And as they go down about 3 inches or so with each hole. They come over anywhere from 4 to 6 inches, drill another hole, and so forth along the whole line of the rock. And then they would have a whole series of sets of these little devices. And this is flat on one side, rounded on the other side. That go in the hole on the one side. They got a second one. They call them feathers. We call them shims today, and then you got a simple little wedge that goes between them. Let it go. In this case, they actually would go in this direction, not to split the rock. And a set of these goes in each hole.
It would wedge it right out.
And then you come along and start at one end and just tap them the whole line up, and then start over again, keep tapping them, and then you hear a nice clean crisp crack sound, and these will go loose, and you put a crowbar in and just pull the piece off.
About not hitting the bottom of the hole?
Yes. And one of the unique features of this particular design versus just putting a straight wedge in the hole is these shims keep the wedge from hitting the bottom of the hole. And what would happen if the wedge was, you just use the wedge, and it hits the bottom of the hole, you're going to have an equal and opposite reaction, and the wedge is going to keep flying out at you.
Huh.
It was actually a very, very dangerous situation.
Oh, yeah.
So this little setup was very safe. It also, because you had the shims rounded to the shape of the hole, directed the force of the hit much better, and it was a much more efficient system than they had prior to it, which was just to stick a bunch of wedges in the rock and hope for the best.
And back up just a little about the spoon, how you got the dust out?
That's
Yes.
what I was wondering, because if at first all that dust would build up in the
That's right.
hole.
Yeah, so the question is how you get all that stone dust that's been ground by the drill out. They would have a little spoon, like a, it's just a bar, of iron, and then they would bang a sort of flat curve on the bottom of it, and you just scoop it out.
A bent shovel.
Yeah.
A miniature bent shovel.
After the introduction of your 10-penny round wire nails, they were making them out of those. So they would just go to the blacksmith shop, and they would just bang the bottom of it flat and turn it into a little spoon. Gravelled out. It's an early 20th century gravel pit, and one of the things you can tell is this is not a quarry. They just went around the rock outcrops rather than taking them out. And most of these pits here are fairly rounded. That's a result of they were using a steam shovel to take the gravel out, which places its operation sometime in the early 20th century. And they did quite a bit of graveling on this side, and they also went on the other side of Jenkins Road and took an enormous amount of gravel out over there too, leaving behind these sort of swampy wetlands we have now. Look at that, yes.
Oh, yeah. There's an old bicycle thing up there, too. Yeah. This was, they dumped a log from the old farm.
Oh, right here. I thought it was down.
An old sled?
Yeah.
Yes.
Looking down at where they used the steam shovel to take out the gravel to use on building roads.
The road was in Jenkins Road's quite early.
But it was probably some kind of road.
The early 20th century did see a lot of, road construction, grading of roads to put in the tar and stuff. A lot of crushed rock operations started up. So it's very possible this was feeding road construction.
My father was born in 1916. He was up central New Hampshire, and he remembers growing up in Sandpit. The road go out from New Hampton over to up to 104, but being built, and all the gravel being carried in, and the road, and all the houses on it, the ones connected to the other side.
Right.
You have to get over towards the Merrill. I think it's the Merrill area. We see a few old houses coming in that way, and there was no road in between.
Right.
So it would have taken an operation like this to build the road up.
They had to minimize how much damage they did to his land. He was a good businessman, and even though he's one of the three members of the company doing the quarry, and he was looking out for his own interests as well as he had a substantial farming operation up in here.
Wait, what was he farming? Do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah.
What we do know is he, based on the surviving documentation, that he had an important meadow, which would have been a mowing meadow for hay.
Yeah.
And he made very specific provisions when he joined the other two gentlemen in forming the quarry business that his meadow would not be damaged in any possible way.
Oh, okay.
It was, so valuable to
Here
him.
comes the mountain bike.
There might be, okay. Hello. Morning.
Wait.
Be careful. We all think you're nuts. On that bike through those rocks.
Right.
Bob does that all the time.
As you can see, the area up in here is very rocky, so any mowable hay field would have been a valuable commodity in this terrain.
Yeah.
And the hay field was in the meadow is down someplace where the swamp is. Unfortunately, the gravel operations really messed up the topography, so we can't tell precisely where it was, but it would have been right along the Scug River, which flows down through here.
Yeah.
And his house and farm are on the other side of the swamp. The house is still there.
Yeah.
I believe the historic society has a photograph showing the house and the barn in place.
Livestock, cows or sheep, I would think. I wouldn't think horses out here. But we've been in places where the cows walk in around the stones, say no problem.
Yeah.
One of the best carom fields we ever found was still being grazed by cows in amongst the woods.
Okay. Wow.
They kept all the brush off, but the cows don't like walking up on stones.
Yeah.
So they don't touch the stone piles. They just eat all the graze around it and keep it clean.
Yeah, William Jenkins was the third generation to live on the property up in here. His grandfather originally settled here in the 1750s, purchased a really large amount of property, although I don't know the acreage.
They're from Malden, they're good.
Yeah. And they came up in here. His grandfather purchased this from the Osgood family, a really large chunk. Built the house over there, and then passed it on to Mr. Jenkins' father, and then William Jenkins himself ends up with the property. And quite a few of the other Jenkins family members eventually end up living up here, basically from here all the ways up to Salem and Middleton Road. There's an old house up on Salem Road that was owned by one of the Jenkins family, and they also had 2 or 3 houses on the other side of the road here, which I don't believe anything survived of. One of which I believe was a rental property. And Mr. Jenkins was probably generating some income from that. He's listed as a yeoman, which means he was a gentleman farmer, owned a lot of acreage, but he was also a very good businessman. Sawmill operation where they were cutting timbers for the maritime industry, shipbuilding. One of their specialties was building what they call a ship knee, which is a curved brace that was important in in the superstructure of the hull. And the tradition is that because the land here was so rocky, it was producing a type of wood that was conducive to cutting ship knees.
Bikes again.
Strong enough to withstand the forces of the ocean.
Hello.
Whoa.
There's an oral history. A young man who was around 20 years old who in 1879 actually worked at Mr. Jenkins' sawmill. And one of his job was to hook up quite a few yoke of oxen and load the wagon up with these ship knees and haul them down to, I believe, the Salem area.
Wow. Huh.
So we know the sawmill was in operation until at least the late 1870s. It burned down in 1897, so most likely it was operational to then. And we'll take a better look at that site when we get over there.
The ship's knees,
Good information.
did they randomly grow that way and he harvest them? Or did maybe he take the sapling?
The crook of a branch or something.
Right, what I'm saying.
That's the strongest part of the, yeah.
But it was sort of random collection as opposed to he was training them to grow that way.
Yeah, I imagine he was just collecting what's already here. We do know the 1830 map that was able to get from the Mass Archives. They wrote in this area, almost the whole area is covered with woodlands.
Woodlands, yes.
So this was, that's why he cited the sawmill over here, because he was smack in the middle of his source of timber. I think we'll continue on into the quarry site.
Yep.
You know how you have that coming down
Right.
on the keel when it goes down like that? That part right there, they use like a white oak on that too. Very strong. Because it could
He was just pointing out
withstand
the
The knee.
You can see how this is like this right here? And that's how they would, it would be very, very strong. So that part coming down on the keel, the white oak is what they normally use.
maybe slow growth white oak.
That's right. Quartz veins.
So
Is that what
there's
that is?
Yeah, the geologist, the fancy word is called differential weathering. And what you have quartz veins, which of course is a very hard material, and the surrounding rock is a lot softer. So the surrounding rock wears away from ice, wind, weather, erosion much faster than the quartz does. So it leaves the quartz veins raised up on the rock.
We have where the soapstone is down here, and the granite fused together. Are you familiar with that?
Sorry.
Yeah, where it's part of the, they call it, it's the extrusion, I believe, or
Yeah.
he's more in the geology. I'm not into it.
Yeah, and maybe we can see it today.
it's when it can't, it's where they've been fused together, whatever that word is. But
And they come to the surface,
they did the
and a geologist saw it and freaked.
yeah.
He was all
They
excited?
did a
Yeah.
study
All right.
on that.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it was, to them, it was like you never ever see this,
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
so
cool.
It was really cool. Yeah.
All right.
For them, I guess,
I've been
yeah.
shown it once. I'm not sure I can find it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Barbara showed it to me,
Yeah.
and I think I could find it.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah.
So, the Native Americans, they had a reason for where they picked this
Okay.
up, and it wasn't because something was
It wasn't
big
because of that.
and- no.
Right.
They had to feel or sense something that there was a spirit there.
Oh, okay.
It's possible, possibly experience some sort of personal vision or dream, or come and felt that there was a spiritual presence here in order for them to consider it sacred. Other than that, it's
that's
just
good to
another
know that.
rock.
Good. I don't want to pass around
Yeah, no, and
wrong information.
the Indian sites that we do have, we confirm it by man-made structures. Unless you have someone, you have a legend or something that's come down with a single structure that's not been altered. For us, as researchers, we can't call anything until we see it, that there's man-made structures around it, and they do fit the profile for the Native American structures. So, yeah.
I mean, we do know the Native Americans were up here. They knew about the soapstone. There's 3 workshop sites along the Scug River where they were
using
it, making bowls and other items.
Good.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the production.
Close by?
That's in the Scug River area here, yeah.
I don't know where they're...
Exactly.
It's on file with the state archaeologist's office.
Okay.
They've been registered.
Yeah.
And I will send, Suzanne Waldo, who's a geologist, did an article on it. It's in the Mass Archaeology Bulletin, which I'll scan and I can send it to you. It's a great article.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be awesome.
She's a good geologist.
Yeah.
Yeah, we came out here.
She's the one who introduced us to it.
She showed us one of the SoapStone workshop areas,
but I can't remember
and gave us a crash course on how to identify them, because she wanted to. We do so much woodworking, she wanted to know anything else we might find.
Oh, yeah.
And then we gave her a crash course in historic quarrying technology. So it was a great little field trip we had.
Nice.
Down around one of these.
Down in here?
Not this particular one. We can't remember which pit.
Oh,
that's our problem.
We're going to come in and try and relocate.
Okay,
but
it was on the edge of this water someplace?
It was on the edge of the water someplace. Right?
Okay. I can spend some time and look around.
Right, and it's not very... Don't touch it. Oh, they can't.
Don't touch
It's just a couple of grooves.
GPS.
That's the trouble. The more people that know about it,
I know.
the less chance of it surviving.
That's right.
Here since the 1750s. William Jenkins, at some point, I don't know precisely when, but in the early 1800s, came into possession of this parcel of land in here. He has a sawmill over here that he sets up sometime prior to 1830. It's shown on the 1830 map. We don't know exactly when he started his sawmill operation. And then in 1834, he writes up a contract with two gentlemen from the North Reading area. One of them's a farmer and businessman named Addison Flint. The other guy's name is Michael Flanelli, who is listed as a master stone cutter. And the three of them write up a contract to go into the soapstone quarrying business as equal partners. And the contract basically is for grants a 14-year lease to the company from William Jenkins to their company. Gives them the right to quarry as much soapstone as they possibly can out of it. In exchange, he gets a 10% cut of the net profits for the 14-year lease. And after they take that 10% off, they split the remaining profits equally three ways amongst the three owners. So he was making out really well. So the business, didn't do terribly well. He's still going to get a chunk of cash for it. That contract also made provisions for setting up a mill someplace along the Scug River below his sawmill to operate machinery related to the quarry. And he was very particular about the location that this mill dam and mill setup could possibly be built. First location is listed as below his sawmill but above his hayfield. So someplace down in this area, there's an 1890 topo map before they gravelled this out that shows that there was a halfway decent drop in elevation, a good mill site. Someplace in the middle of the swamp here. And apparently that wasn't a perfectly good option, because the contract makes provision for a second mill site below his house where there's another steep drop off. But since that location would have flooded out his valuable hayfield, the contract specifies that they put the mill down there, they're going to have to dig a canal and run water from someplace up here around his meadow, past his house, down to the mill site. Both of which would have been expensive options, because as you can see, the land is very tight up here. There's a very narrow spot where he builds his sawmill. Great location, short mill dam, cheap place to build a mill operation. But as the Scug River comes down, the valley widens out. So the location just above his hayfield would have required a fairly substantial long mill dam to go in order to set it up, which would have been expensive. The other option of putting the mill below his house and running a canal down was also an expensive option. And they ultimately solve this problem. They decide not to build either one. What they do is end up bringing in a portable steam-powered saw rig. Someplace, it was situated someplace over here because most of the saw and slab rejects are all down in this area. And we know that because the Gloucester Democrat, a local newspaper out of Gloucester, ran a very short article, about 3 sentences long, and it was ran in October of 1836, announcing that on the estate of William Jenkins, a valuable soapstone quarry has been opened up, and the quarry is being operated by a steam-powered sawmill.
Wow, what a lucky find.
A find that we could not have made without modern digital searchable databases.
Wow.
Because the presumption has been, since neither of those two mill sites were ever developed, that they somehow converted the sawmill over to sawing the stone. But it turns out when you read the contracts closely, this William Jenkins makes it very clear that his sawmill is not part of the deal. And he's going to continue to operate that as a sawmill. It's too valuable a business for him. And the contract actually specifies that they did build the mill dam down here in the valley, and they built it too high and flooded up his sawmill, so he couldn't, damaged it. That the company would pay him damages to repair his mill. So he.
So what is this?
What we're looking at here is a 3-sided foundation dug into the hillside. It is a quarry shed, or a cutting shed. And all this chip debris you're seeing on the road out here, this is all coming from them chipping away quarry blocks to form those gravestones and fountain bases and other architectural pieces that we're making. And your master stone cutter,
Finishing shed
Mr.
like this.
Flanelli, would have worked in here with his apprentices. There would have been a wooden roof over it. That way they could, they could work here during inclement weather.
Even in the sun.
And keep the sun off of them. Obviously, the guys working the quarry itself were, didn't quite have that luxury, but your stone cutters and their apprentices were valuable labor. You wanted to keep them happy. And I've actually, let's find it here, brought a photograph I took out of a book showing a stone cutter's shed. And you can see them working on pieces in here. And the floor is littered with chips. And that's what we're seeing out here.
Yeah. That was the Cape Ann Granite.
Yeah, this comes out of a book called Hammers on Stone. It's on the Rockport and Gloucester quarries. A really great book. The road we're standing right in front of here was constructed sometime probably in the spring of 1836. Mr. Jenkins and Mr. Flint and Mr. Flanelli amended the original contract and made provisions to run a road from the quarry directly out to Jenkins Road. And Jenkins was very particular about it. He says they had the right to build the road. They had located in such a way they did the least amount of damage to his property. They had to fence it so that nothing would happen to his fields. The cow, the oxen and the horse teams wouldn't wander out and damage his fields. And one of the questions we've trying to sort out is why did they put this road in? Because Jenkins actually already had an existing road from his sawmill. It goes from the sawmill. It's on the other side of the Scug River here. Cuts down to where his house is. It's still, the historic house is still there. There's a bridge site, and it crosses there and out to Jenkins Road. And it's why wouldn't they just, haul all the cut soapstone just across the Scug River? There's actually a little bridge site below the sawmill there, and then out and around. Why go through the expense of cutting a new road? And as far as we can determine, we suspect that the existing bridges on his sawmill road were not structurally sound enough to handle the weight of the soapstone coming out.
Yeah.
This stuff weighs quite. I haven't got the exact number on it, but it's a piece of 1 cubic foot of granite weighs about 150 pounds. So the soapstone is probably in the similar rate. So you're talking 300 or 400 pounds or better just for this chunk here in the corner of the.
And they made some pretty big pieces here.
Yeah.
Those fountains or whatever they were, huge.
So this road has no bridges on it. It's very flat. It's well engineered. So we figured they were carrying some really heavy weight out of here.
Yeah.
You know, several tons or better.
You were saying it took several teams of oxen?
Yeah.
Pairs of oxen?
And we know even the stuff being called, you know, some of the stuff being pulled out of the sawmill, you know, they were hooking up multiple oxen teams to pull it out.
Yeah.
And we know from photographs from down the Cape Ann area that, you know, it's not uncommon to put 10 yoke of oxen out to pull, you know, haul out a large, you know, dimensional piece of granite being used for a base of a statue or
Amazing.
or other public monument. This stuff weighed quite a bit. There is actually a well right next to the building here, which would have been used by the workers. I guess it probably.
I wonder how deep that goes.
That's a good question.
Well, we did try to take a thing and poke it down in, and it went quite a bit.
Okay.
It's just filled up with
sediment leaves over the years.
Yeah, would have been cut down into the water.
Probably, I bet it was pretty deep.
The little water table below the.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, yeah, here's one right here.
Well, bikers coming through.
Thanks.
Oop, is it okay to step on the...
Anybody else?
Nope.
Okay.
This is what got us excited over here.
Yeah, this is.
Oh yeah.
So here we have actually several examples we're going to show you, but start with this one. This is a soapstone slab.
I don't know if you can see the
There's the striations from the saw blade. And sawing stone is completely different from sawing wood.
Yeah.
You don't actually use a tooth blade. They actually would use, and I'll have some illustrations here, hopefully get out here, of a saw rig. And what they were using was, you know, iron blades. They're long, they were smooth on the bottom, and what they were feeding, you see these, there's a water feed system in here. And what they were feeding is a slurry of water and sand. And what you're doing is you're getting the sand underneath these iron blades, and the blades are moving the sand back and forth, and the quartz in the sand is what's actually cutting the rock.
Oh. I have cut some stone in my life with soapstone, and I use a bandsaw, and it cuts right through it.
Oh, okay.
But it's like talc. It's so powdery, and so dense.
Soapstone's heavily talc based.
Yeah, it's talc. Yeah, it's all talc. Yeah.
But you're saying that...
There is a piece that I'm told, I haven't found it, but with the blade stuck in it.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, Barbara had seen it one time, and she
Wow.
couldn't relocate it, but it has the blade stuck in it.
Oh.
Yeah. It broke or something.
And they were using what's called a gang saw, which is there's multiple blades in it, which is.
So they could cut like thin strips?
Oh,
We have
oh
an
yeah.
example of that up here in a few minutes.
Yeah.
We'll show you.
This is from the 1890s. This is for sawing marble up in Vermont, but you can actually, these are the blade ends here, so that you can actually, you know, they were cutting them anyway 2-3 inch.
So your sinks
slabs.
and stuff, so you could get the parts of your sink slabs,
You can
right?
get your
Sink
coffees
slabs. They're also using gravestones.
Gravestones,
for this one.
right.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Back to this illustration. It's a little easier.
That is so cool.
And it's a very simple rig. There's a swing arm on either end, so it swings back and forth like you know, playground seesaw swing.
Wow.
Yeah, this over here.
This here shows the width of these are the blade cuts here.
Oh, yeah.
So it's about 2 inches.
Yeah.
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blades showing here. There may have been more.
Oh.
And what happened here is they got to the bottom of the rock, and for some reason, they couldn't cut through the bottom of this. Maybe it was transitioning to another material. And so what they had to do is they had to break those slabs off. So you had your vertical slabs coming up here. And so what they did was they cut in from the side.
Careful, you're in poison ivy there.
With these trapezoid cape chisel marks, and just popped them off like a page at a time in a book.
How cool is that?
And that's why you have it. There's a whole series of them here.
It's layered like.
Right.
Do you have the cape chisel with you?
Yes, I do. And you can see they go up slightly each time. They would cut the first ones off, and then they couldn't quite. You had to come in slightly in order to hit the tool.
This one down here. Over here. It's got
They come in below where it broke off, so the next one has to go higher.
Right, exactly. So this one's on top of it.
And over here you can see the actual mark where they didn't chip out the whole thing, where this fits in.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how we figured out what tool they used. Because on very few ones I found, it was this complete hole. I could see a groove going perpendicular to the length of it. So it was a little tiny groove in the thing, and found out it was a single tooth. So we reconstructed this whole thing to figure out. It was never written up. It was something different than the round holes that was being used at the time, and I know.
Yeah, we had these divot marks. So we had a rough idea of how the tool was operating. We went down to the flea market over there at Todd Farm and just started going through the tool dealers' junk things, and we came up actually I think this is the one we found originally. And so we bought a whole bunch of them for $1 a piece, brought them back out, and we matched them to the holes, the divot marks in the bottom.
Wow. And
And the way this works is you come in and you create a series of these divots on the bottom here, from banging straight down.
Yeah.
And then you come in at about a 30, 40 degree angle and hit it, and you break off all the divots. And we've actually tried this, and these angled...
Right over here's got a flat stone. Flat.
Yeah, these angled sides to it are just a byproduct of this process of cutting. And it cuts very quickly. It's very efficient. Wow. The technique was developed by 3 gentlemen down in the Quincy quarries, Quincy, Mass, in 1803. We have a written account of them. They're just discovery. They did it on a Sunday.
And they went out and celebrated.
And they went and retired to the local tavern to celebrate. And it took off like wildfire. We just recently found examples, an 1804 example over in Salem on a firmly dated house foundation. Went over to Beverly, 1808, the foundation for the Beverly Powder House was done using this technique, and it just kept spreading.
The celebration took place in November of 1803. So to find something in 1803, we don't think we're going to find a building.
Right.
But being 1804 is the next best.
Yeah.
Wow, we're on a high.
Right.
So it's very possible that it's a Pingree Gardner House in Salem. It's very possible they might have even imported the granite they used right out of Quincy for it. Salem being a port.
Because they tried to keep it quiet. It was the tools. They wear the tools down so quickly that they hired a blacksmith and brought them down onto the site. And all your quarries know that they have to have a blacksmith on site. The big ones, many quarry, a number of blacksmiths. Because the tools had to be sharpened every day.
Right.
So the technique continues to use in the early 1870s, and the introduction of mechanized drilling puts it out of commission. So it's 1803 to maybe 1875 is the date range for these tool marks.
And in this area, the Cape Chisel was as popular as the plug drill. And we see many stones where they have both. They experimented. We don't think about it, but they were constantly experimenting. And there's many examples where you see a flat wedge, and then you'll have a couple of round holes. They will sometimes do all one or all the other, but there are other times where they mix and match.
They were experimenting to find the best combination for a particular type of rock to get a clean split. A lot of the rock we're seeing all in this roadbed is all waste rock. It's all stuff that they couldn't sell. They broke the wrong way, something went wrong with it, and they had to dump it. Which, you know, every time you have to dump something, you're losing money. So if you, and one of the things that we're fascinated about this particular quarry site is the extensive amount of experimentation that went on, trying to figure out how to split soapstone.
Do you think that saw was located here?
Someplace in here.
Here, right in here.
Someplace, yeah. Haven't figured out exactly where, but there's so much cut
right here
stuff. It had to be fairly close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know how big, so if you found some metal fragments, you might.
Yeah.
We haven't searched the area.
I'm going to have to ask Barbara again if she can recall.
Yeah, if she knows where the saw blade is, they probably.
Yeah.
You want to take it down and show the newest find we found with the this partially sawn one? We got to find.
Oh
it.
yeah, sure. You want to answer the question about the experimental work? We were talking about why they were experimenting here.
Yeah.
All of these quarry techniques were developed for hard stones, granites mostly, and they don't work terribly well in soft stone. And that's why we see so much experimentation going on here. Is the softer stones tend not to have as good a grain in terms of an existing fracture plane. Like most granites form in layers, and there's an actual grain with the direction that the crystal's cooled in. And if you can find that, you can split granite exceptionally well and very flat. Whereas this stuff is a very fine grain metamorphic rock. It's been compressed, and it's more towards a sandstone type thing, and there's less good vertical cleavage in it, and so it makes it a lot more difficult to try and split it apart. When they originally opened the quarry up, they called this stuff freestone because the soapstone did form in about half meter or 1 meter slabs naturally, where they could split it apart. But then they got in and realized that they needed a meter wide wasn't going to cut it for what they were doing, and so they had to reduce these blocks to smaller sizes. And that's when they started running into trouble. They could break the big pieces off nice and easy using these 3 foot wide natural separation planes that were in the soapstone, but if you wanted something 2 inches deep, wide, you had to go at it from a different perspective, And so they tried the round holes. Round holes notoriously don't work well in soft stone. That's why they went to this flat wedge method, where they, instead of having those really thin wedges, you have a much wider wedge, so you get more surface area. And they end up using that very extensively here. It worked halfway decently, but they continue to actually experiment. We actually see one of their experiments over here. What they did was they drilled a series of very closely spaced round holes, and then they started taking a chisel and knocking out the space in between the holes, and basically trying to create a channel in the rock, so you could, instead of trying to have to split it apart, you're just going to physically cut a whole channel down in. It takes a lot of work to do that, but it is a technique that does work with soft stone. And they did experiment with it, but they don't think they ever employed it in any extensive amounts. This is one of the few examples we ever found here.
Cool. We got a couple of mountain bikes.
They would go down, they would drill holes down 6 to 8 feet down, side by side, and then they had a special bit that they put on the mechanical drill. They would stop the rotation of the drill bit, but allow it to still bounce up and down. And they had a special bit that would break down the walls between the holes. It was used out in the Flint Quarry in Munson. They had a very valuable white NAHS rock that didn't like to split well with any other technique, so they were going through this very expensive broach channelings to try and get it out.
There's one little tiny partial hole from the tape chisel.
Yeah. So this is obviously an early example of them experimenting, which also got us very excited. This from the 1830s.
Especially when it's right out in the open like that.
Right. According to one of the historical write-ups, one of these sawn slabs was broken off. It used to be much longer and was used for a gravestone for a later Jenkins family member. So it's down here someplace. I'm just not sure which one. I have a write-up of the talk, and it was done in the 1960s. It came in and hacked a piece of it off.
Oh, wow.
I'll make sure I send you a copy of that material.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wow.
Yep.
Another mountain biker coming through.
Nice.
Yeah, it looks like they may have had 5 or 6 blades on the saw.
Now, what is this on here?
Yes. This probably had an apprentice in the shop practicing. They were they were reducing the surface down.
Oh.
It's not well done, but
Almost...
there is one of the finishing techniques that, for finished rock has a speckled surface like this. Generally much better executed than this. This is a piece of raised rock. You can see the field split over here. So they probably had a very new apprentice who was practicing some basic tool techniques on this piece.
Yeah, it seems like a cutting board almost. Like he was working on something maybe even on top of it. But
Yeah.
practice, huh?
Yeah. Some fancy buildings will sometimes have a line of blocks. They'll have a nice clean border around the outside, around maybe a 2-inch border, and in the middle of it, it's got this very textured, heavily surfaced tool. It was popular for a while. I suspect that's what they were practicing here. It's obviously not very flat, and it's not well executed, but that seems to be what they were after. All right, we'll go down to the next one. There was a...
Okay.
You want to go see it?
A dotted line of a Cape chisel
Is that the one has both?
used to split the rock.
Oh, you haven't found it yet. Oh, all right. We got the dash line up here.
And there's a bunch of it up in here, probably a later phase in the Quarry operation. I'm not sure how successful it was, but they managed to split some of it with it. There is some sort of structure in here. We're still trying to figure out whether it was a bridge site or possibly possibly an attempt at building a mill dam.
Runner coming through.
Here in this debris.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I love that place.
Yeah.
Springtime?
They sold there's some architectural stuff done for some buildings on Summer Street in Boston.
The back bay and stuff too.
There's gravestones in two of the cemeteries here in Andover where there's SoapStone. I know a mantle inside the William Jenkins house.
I have a picture of that.
It's made out of it. I'm sure, given the scale of the operations here, they've made a lot of other stuff. We just don't know where it ended up.
I have the photograph of that man.
Really cool. And then, I mean, it's got a curve to it and angles, but it's also decorative.
Been up high.
You have the curve in here, then you have the curve on that side.
So
it
it could be seen from underneath as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it had this and that, so this was the and it was curved on this side.
Something obviously went wrong. Possibly the failure of this corner here. And they dumped it.
I mean, how would they make that? Like I can.
Yeah,
You can actually
understand.
carve with I've carved it with wood carving tools. It holds the edge.
Yeah.
And you can file it with the file beautifully. It really smooths out so easy. I mean, it's very easy to cut. Yeah,
And then
it's
you
not
need to have
difficult
it
at all.
like symmetrical and like.
Exactly. If you know, I mean,
Somebody
it's
has
so.
to have an eye for it.
Yeah.
Right, and my sculptures, to see something in a piece
It's so
it's beyond me.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of times they were working for, detailed plans made by the architects.
And you can, you
Should
can
be
see
soft.
how like it just,
It's very,
and you can see how soft it is.
And it's flaky almost too. It's fragile.
And it's very chalky.
It took an art to finish these things to get them right.
Yeah.
Suggest it wouldn't be
just,
too good for kitchen countertops.
No.
beautiful kitchen countertops.
Yeah.
You scratch them, you take some sandpaper and you just
Smooth it out.
smooth it out.
Right.
But no chopping of the meat, the bones.
It's non-reactive. It doesn't react to a lot of materials, so it's and unlike your granite countertops, which have to be sealed because they're semi-porous, this stuff you don't have to do much with. If you wanted to get a little dark, you can put a little oil on it.
Great in wood stoves too, is to retain the heat. People put them on top of the wood stove too. Holds the heat in.
Yeah, program the other night you mentioned the
Bed warmers.
Bed warmers, yeah.
With a wire.
yeah.
That's what you were trying to say, I
Right.
think. Yeah, just to hold it.
So this is the reject pile, and here's all the waste rock. Some of it's like this. It's not even soapstone. They were taking off some of the other rock to get at the soapstone. It outcropped here. The geology reports from the 1830s felt it was probably about 50 feet deep. They described it as several rods wide, which is about 50, 60 feet. We don't know how long the operation went. That's the one detail no one has seemed to get to the bottom of. There is a rumor that supposedly the treasurer of the company made off with the money.
Yeah,
and
that's
That's what we've heard.
That's what
And
we've
that
always
was just-
heard.
And I don't,
Oral
looking at
history.
what we're seeing here, we don't think that's the case. It looks like they ran out of rock.
Oh.
They were when you get up on that cliff, especially higher up, you start seeing where they're cutting away. They're starting to cut into the NAHS rock, probably trying to figure out and get at more soapstone. It looks like they worked the quarry out. There's some left in it. There's one ledge left that they could have done, but they cut it really deep, and you can see a lot of pools in there now. Which they wanted to go any deeper, they went out and installed pumps and pump the water out of the hole.
We can work our way up too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this actually looks at one point probably drained better. It's cut all the way out to the river.
Yeah.
They cut themselves a drainage trench in here,
Keep the water.
trying to get that, go down deeper.
And when the leaves are all off, you can see a lot of the marks better.
Do you think that they must have had like derricks or something set up here where we
That's
can move this stuff?
Yeah, that's a really good question that we don't have an answer to yet.
I wonder. I mean, it's
Some kind of
awfully
three-legs
heavy,
arrangement at
this
least.
stuff. Yeah.
And a hoist.
They probably
And a hoist and
yeah.
pulley system or something.
the pattern
And
of way
use
this
the oxen maybe to.
the pattern of dispersal in here tends not to suggest a derrick. Derrick has a distinct pattern. We can actually see it over the granite quarry.
Yeah.
They have one over there without question. Here they probably had a much simpler hoisting system, whether it's a tripod or an A-frame set up, and they can lift it. I guess a lot of it was just dragged out of here. This stuff's, from here it's just scattered back.
Yep.
Usually, if you have a derrick, there would be a clear area
Clearing,
here, and then there'd
yeah.
be a huge circular pile around the edge where they were
Right.
dumping it.
Yeah.
This tends to be more characteristic of dragging it out.
Dragging it out, huh? Wow. Really a labor-intensive operation.
Yeah, exactly.
Did they ever say? Have you ever found any information as to how many people were employed here at one time?
No, actually no. we're lucky we have the information we have. The original contracts were in the possession of the Hill family that bought the Jenkins house, and they got transcribed back in the 60s. So, you know, most of the time we don't even have the contracts for most quarry operations. We get lucky to mention a geology report someplace, or you get a newspaper advertisement for them. There's just so many of these things. There's no real thought to hold on to the documentation, the business records. And, kept in the family and just disappeared. A lot of quarry quarry sites we go into, we have to try and decipher it from the physical evidence of what's left. Geologist. He had estimated the outcrop to be several rods wide, rod being 16.5 feet. So we're looking at anyways from 40 something to 60 something feet wide. He estimated, so I think 3 rods deep, 60 feet deep, roughly. He did note that it went into the bedrock at an angle, so it's probably going in underneath the granite. Make it, probably what's happened here, make it very difficult to quarry it without taking all the top rock.
Yeah, the hard granite above it.
Right. Not to mention the fact that if you dig too much further, you're going to end up in the mill pond.
Yeah. Oh, really?
This
on the other side, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Basically, the mill's built between this outcrop of rock and another rock on the other side. It's a great mill site.
Some whatever.
Yeah.
Some.
Into the mill. I'm not sure what he had. Maybe he put a second saw in. I'm not sure. We do know from the contract that he was using a wheel.
So the wheel would have been what, out here?
Would have been in here someplace.
Yeah.
Kathy's husband.
I have a picture.
You have,
I do have a picture, but it doesn't really show.
Wow.
I mean, a guy is laying on the. Have you seen it?
No, just tell me about it.
It's kind of laying on the beams that come out and stuff, and it's kind of cool. But I wish we had more.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't know if it's undershot or an overshot wheel. He just mentions it. He does have a wheel. Built very heavy stone, obviously, to withstand any flooding problem coming in. We know there's a road on that. It comes out of that side and down to the house.
Yep.
And this is what it is.
Oh yeah.
One of the shortest mill dams I've ever seen in my life. It's got a natural cattle hole here.
Right.
So they didn't have to build a huge dam.
Right.
No.
He does, in the contract, he does describe this slide over here as his mill yard. So presumably, originally he was storing some lumber over here.
Oh, okay.
And it especially says,
So this saw was just used for cutting the wood.
Right.
Right, the timber, yeah.
Probably originally an up and down saw. He may have converted to a circular saw later. I don't know.
Right.
It's really hard to say.
And we've heard a couple different versions of the Indian word skunk, right? You know what have you done any research on that?
I've read Gene Winter's article on it. It's also Mass Archaeology. I can send you that. The work he did suggested it meant snake.
Snake, because of winding. Yeah, we'd also heard swift too, because there's a swift flowing river or something at one time or something.
Yeah, he outsent his.
Yeah.
He did a lot of work on
Snake, okay, yeah, I've heard that too. Snake, both snake and swift. Snake makes more sense because it does snake around.
We haven't found any quarry marks in any of the stones over there, although we haven't gotten in too far from the water. That's a lot we can see from here. We haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So you think it was just field gathered boulders that they used for the foundation?
Yeah, at this point. We don't know when. We know the mill was here by 1830. It predates that. It's probably taken a lot of research to pin down its initial date construction. Probably whenever William Jenkins got the property from his father. We believe his father split up the property. His father, it's actually listed in the contract as owning a piece of land up here and giving permission for them to quarry on it.
Oh, no kidding. Oh.
So we know he was still alive at the time, so his son William bought part of it or took an early inheritance. Obviously did very well with it.
Are there any descendants of Jenkins living in this area? Do you know?
I have to ask Carol. I don't know.
I don't know, yeah. Yeah, Carol would probably know, yeah. I don't know.
Or somebody from the Andover Historical might know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carol communicates with them.
Right.
Oh, yeah, she's not the end of that.
Yeah. In North Andover, some of the mills were started with the War of 1812.
That makes sense.
And so we had to do it domestically. So like there was a mill on the pond, the Lake Ochicwick, Stevens Pond. There was a mill there, and I think it's 1813 was when they, Carol would know better.
The embargo British goods.
Exactly, is when they set up the first sawmill, or a sawmill, which is just an interesting marker in history. It makes so much sense, but I never would have thought of it. So
he's supplying the shipbuilding industry.
Right.
War of 1812 certainly had its fair share of privateers and certainly would have been a good market for it.
Oh.
Oh my.
It's post 1803.
So that dates the addition to the mill. Yeah. The lighting's just right to see.
What is it?
Oh.
Roughly.
It's a tool mark. Is it a Cape Ann tool mark, you saying? Yeah.
Is it flat wedge or round?
Round.
Round hole.
The second boulder down, left corner.
Heavy block